Welcome to the Friends at Work podcast, the podcast about mastering emotional intelligence at work.
I think the underlying motivation was we can make a difference in our world by inspiring our kids to be the creative, compassionate, curious, courageous leaders across all fields. And how do we do that? We're not doing that in what we're giving them in school today. We're not doing that in how our society is organized today with very structured interactions for our kids. And that's how our world has evolved. At least this part of the world, that it's really not possible for kids to have space to freely explore things and hang out all day long and find their way around the world. And so how do we create spaces that facilitate that in a meaningful way for kids? We've just expanded to meet the demand, and there's more there. So, we know we've outgrown the space that we're in. We love the space we're in. It's been a fabulous place to get started. But with more space, we could bring so much more programming to more kids. And we see how it connects with kids, how it engages them, not only in the moment, but in their learning back at school. And one of the things we've been really fortunate over the past year and a half is to have some hard evidence about the impact of our programs. We've had a partnership with Harvard, a program at Harvard that's looked at STEM learning, STEM engagement, but also 21st century skills, perseverance, grit, creative problem solving. And we're off the charts in the impacts we're having for kids.
Hi, this is Toye, and I'm your host on the Friends at Work podcast. You were just listening to Cara Lesser, the founder of Kid Museum, a former public policy expert. In this episode, Cara shares the backstory of how Kid Museum came about, also milestones they reached over the last 7 years, and the impact they're having on kids' education in Montgomery County, Maryland. Just before you hear our full conversation, here's a quick announcement. In the coming weeks, the Friends of Work podcast with Toye will be bringing you even more exciting guests and events. To support this podcast and to learn more about our future plans, please go to patreon.com/friendsatwork. That is patreon.com/friendsatwork. Thank you.
My name's Cara Lesser, and I'm the founder and executive director of Kid Museum.
I've actually attended one of your passed through when you were doing one of your older maker conferences.
The Maker Fair in Silver
Spring, and mind blown at just seeing all the stuff the kids were doing and how packed it was. And then I think last year was your first KidFest.
Right, that's right.
How and why the transition from building this career for 20 years and they're like, okay, I'm done. We're going to just hang out with kids and try and do stuff for them. Why Kid Museum?
Yeah, so it was in some ways a sudden change and in other ways not. For me, I've always been driven by how to make a difference in the world. There was enough frustration points had accumulated for me in the world of policy. To me, there was this sort of combination of what I was experiencing in my professional world and in the personal world. So in the professional world, I was seeing all this opportunity for major change in how we organize healthcare, but also a lack of creative leadership in the moment, lack of that balance of being bold to make brave changes with humility, but bold and driving things forward. And then seeing on a personal level, my own children entering school, sort of transitioning from a preschool environment into their formal education and how in the box it was. And I said, these things have something to do with one another. So, one was my response to frustration was to jump from that one world to another. But I think the underlying motivation was we can make a difference in our world by inspiring our kids to be the creative, compassionate, curious, courageous leaders across all fields. And how do we do that? We're not doing that in what we're giving them in school today. We're not doing that in how our society is organized today with very structured interactions for our kids. And that's how our world has evolved. At least this part of the world, that it's really not possible for kids to have space to freely explore things and hang out all day long and find their way around the world. And so how do we create spaces that facilitate that in a meaningful way for kids? So, on one level, it is fun and it is joyful and it is all of that. On another level, it is serious business that we're about inspiring kids to be the generation of leaders that we want and need for the future. So there's a real agenda in what we're doing, not a political agenda, but an agenda around activating this creative sense of agency in the world that we want our kids to have with them as they grow up. And that creative potential that you see in kids, and it's so vibrant in kids when they're 3, 4, 5 years old. We don't want to turn that light off when they're 7, 8, 9, much less 13, 14, 15. And so, finding a way to sustain that experience of creative exploration and real meaningful growth for kids that can complement what they get in the classroom. And it's not saying that that's all they need. They need academic rigor and you need to learn the facts about the world, but you also need to couple that with kids learning how to really exercise that creativity and how they put things together and think about how to be problem solvers for the future.
One of the things that comes to mind is, how did you move from idea to action?
So yeah, it's sort of a slow growing snowball right at the beginning, right? It's an idea and you bat it around. There are a couple of kind of critical change points, I would say. A major one was just deciding to pursue the concept and not just have this as, wouldn't it be nice conversation, but deciding to leave my job in the world of health policy,
How
leave
did that feel, first of all?
It felt freeing and scary all at the same time. I mean, it was it felt like, on some level, you're like, is this career suicide? You're just jumping off a cliff. Now, the reality is, could you go back? Sure, at some point, probably, but you're making a real pivot change. And so it was, that was the first big sort of step out of one world and step into another and just commit to it. Then there's sort of the next phase, I would say, of an active research phase of figuring out what do I really mean by this concept? What would this look like? I did not have a strong idea at the beginning of exactly what it would look like. So it was a lot of exploring what's out there of other kid-focused learning spaces. I knew that I didn't want to be creating a traditional children's museum that was geared toward preschoolers. This was really more about elementary, middle school, school-aged youth, and a different phase of childhood. So part of it was figuring out what was out there that we could learn from as examples. You can see I've moved right into We Speak because there was a team of people working on this together, and that was important from the get-go too, to not feel isolated in this work.
So how did you gather that team?
So at the beginning, it started with friends of friends, and there was just a small group, 3-4 of us at the outset. Started putting the idea out there. Some more people came in. It was all volunteer. It was all just driven by passion of what we were trying to create.
So someday you just decided, I'm going to talk about it with this friend who might be interested. Or come over for coffee and let's have this conversation. And we're like, I know such and such a person who might be interested. Can we bring them in? Is that like how it grew?
Exactly. Very organic like that. And still many of the core people involved in our board today have been involved from the beginning like that. So just get into a conversation around the passion of what's driving me to make this change. It connects with passion points for other people, and it grows from there.
So shared value was one of the things that you got. I'm also looking at this as talking to people who want to start something and who never get to the point where you are right now, where it's an ongoing concern that's also looking to expand even more. Finding the right mix of people.
Yeah.
So would you say that the people that you had around you, were they based on just personal friendships or just people you met over the course of your career. What was your environment like from a socioeconomic point of view? Of looking at it, finding people who not only have the expertise, but also have the resources to actually help get this off the ground.
Yeah.
What would you say? How was that kind of mix for you?
Right. Well, so, I mean, it's interesting, really the core financial base to get this organization going. I mean, other than there were people who had the luxury to volunteer their time, significant pieces of their time. So that's, you're definitely, there's a socioeconomic piece from that perspective. But in terms of the sort of cash resources that we were able to start pulling together, that came more from local government and just pursuing other grant opportunities. So it wasn't really a self-financed project. I mean, people, again, put in their time.
But also had the knowledge to be able to say, this local government has this grant available.
Right.
And we can pursue this.
Right. But a lot of that, I don't know that any of us had that knowledge before we started.
But you were able to
figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, right. Yes.
So. And I think that is where, having the background in public policy, I was able to navigate those things maybe and connect to the right people. Again, you don't know what it's all leading to.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think there was some sort of figuring out the concept work, but then it was also just taking advantage of opportunities that presented themselves. So as we built this network of people who were interested in the concept, opportunities came up. So the very first thing that I did as an organization was participate in organizing a festival called the World of Montgomery Festival, which is something we're still involved in to this day. But it preceded our doing the Maker Faire. And it was an opportunity to learn how to present ourselves as an organization and a large-scale public event, to coordinate with a lot of different, organizations and individuals who had similar interests, and show that we were more than an idea on a piece of paper, but we could make something happen. So it was the first opportunity for us to prove ourselves as a capable organization, I think.
Okay.
And something that we can present, something that's engaging to the public, which, again, there's this concept, but until you do it, will it happen? So we did that festival. That gave us the gumption to go and say, we can bring the first Maker Faire to the DC area. And we partnered with Discovery and Make Magazine, the Maker Faire, and assembled our first Maker Faire in downtown Silver Spring.
Nice.
So I think that, again, it was sort of, there's an opportunity, and then how do you build on this, thinking about how you strategically build on that opportunity. But it's not something that anyone would write down on a piece of paper in an abstract way of, here's my concrete plan of how I'm going to make this happen. It's living it in the moment and finding your way.
I love that. Lessons as you go.
Yeah. And
opportunities opening as you keep going. It brings a thought to my mind. There's a quote that someone used to make around me many years ago that stuck with me. It says something like, keep going, the end that you thought you saw was just a bend.
That's great.
And just the idea that you have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. You start seeing better.
Yeah.
And if people are like how I used to be, which was the person who wanted to see the Z before it started out on A,
right?
you won't see the full picture until you start out. And I think that's a lesson that I'm drawing from what you said.
Yeah.
Action is more important than the plan.
Yeah, it's probably
the plan is important.
Right. You need a reference point. You need to have some idea of what you're headed toward, right? You can't just be all over the place, but be flexible and open to lots of ways to get there too.
Yeah. And I think that's the faith factor of stepping out to do something like this. And just know it will get done. Not sure how it will get done. I'm not sure when it will be done. But as I keep going, I will know the next thing to do, and then structure starts coming out of that.
Right. And I think as it grows, that sort of team of advisors who are with you, mentors or advisors or whatever you call them, that help shape those decisions along the way, that's even more important, right? So none of this, you're, at least in my experience, are out there doing this on your own. It's as it becomes more complex, you need a more complex team to help manage it.
Exactly. But how do you manage, as someone who's, I suspect a part of your role there is to keep expanding your relationships with all the different stakeholders.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about the importance of that? And I'm asking this from the perspective of someone listening who wants to start an idea and knows now that the important thing is to take action, but also needs to know that relationships matter to get these things done.
Right.
And this is true whether in the non-profit sector or in the for-profit sector or a hybrid of both. How, from your experience, can you speak to the importance of building relationships on multiple levels with staff, with board of directors, with the local government? Just how has that happened?
Yeah.
And how can you speak to the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I can say it any more eloquently than you said it there, that it is just so important. I mean, that's at the end of the day, what all of it is based on is those relationships, and they expand and deepen. And so you have to sort of work on both levels of that, of growing the range of contacts that are sort of really you're working closely with, but also deepening the relationships with core group, but that core group continues to expand out. So it seems to me it keeps ratcheting up what the need to be hyper articulate about what you're pursuing in the moment. I mean, obviously there's the big picture of the concept, but where we are in this moment and where we're trying to get to in that next step, and then really being able to share in that the work to move that. It's not a delegation. You're never delegating the work, but it's moving to much more of a shared experience of moving the organization, and whether that's with staff or with board or other stakeholders, as you're saying, government officials. And there's so many different perspectives that are critical to really meaningfully move the work. And so articulating where we are in the moment and that longer term vision, but what those immediate next steps are, options for next steps, in order to really empower all of those various actors to really work with you and work and truly have shared vision of what we're working toward.
So articulating where you are, being clear about where you want to go.
Right.
The key lesson is to articulate, be clear.
Yeah.
And just
which is hard to do sometimes, right?
Yeah. Tell me about it. So how do you hire? I suspect to do something like this, you need people who not just have skills, but have passion and buy-in. I watched a few clips on your video clips on your website and thought they were great because none of them were you, but they spoke very passionately about what it did and what the vision of Kid Museum was about. So what are your tips for hiring?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's really that shared sense of purpose is probably the number one factor for at least, where we are in the work now. I think that just really believing in what we're trying to make happen and being able to, as much as you can, as you first meet someone and get to know them, see, is that authentically there, that shared sense of purpose. But then I think it's also flexibility, adaptability, and a willingness to learn and try new things. That's just as important as the technical skill that someone's bringing for whatever angle that they're coming into our organization for.
So how old is Kid Museum now?
Well, it depends how you count, right? We were officially December 2011 is when we formed as an organization. In 2012 is when we started our first offsite programming. We didn't have a home yet. We had an administrative office and a incubator program in the Trawick Foundation in Bethesda. So we had an office and we ran programming in the community. And then in October 2014 is when we opened at the Davis Library in Bethesda. So since October 2014, we've been running a 7-day-a-week operation out of the library.
Wow, 7 days.
Yeah. Thank God there are not more days in the week.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a great operation. Good Lord. That's, yeah.
Yeah.
And how's it been so far?
It's been phenomenal. I mean, I think, and to be fair, the day one, we didn't open at 7 days a week, but we ramped up pretty quickly to 7 days a week. And now it's because the demand was there for it. So I think one thing that surprised us is how much interest there was from schools and school systems right from the get-go. So our school programs of schools coming for a field trip or a series of field trips, which is more of what we do at the middle school level, that fills, the school year for us during the week. And then we have after-school programs and family programs on the weekends.
And you have summer programs too.
And right? Summer programs. We're running summer camps. Camps are going like crazy right now. I think that we've just expanded to meet the demand, and there's more there. So, I mean, we know we've outgrown the space that we're in. We love the space we're in. It's been a fabulous place to get started. But with more space, we could bring so much more programming to more kids. And we see how it connects with kids, how it engages them, not only in the moment, but in their learning back at school. And, one of the things we've been really fortunate over the past year and a half is to have some hard evidence about the impact of our programs. We've had a partnership with Harvard, a program at Harvard that's looked at STEM learning, STEM engagement, but also 21st century skills, perseverance, grit, creative problem solving. And we're off the charts in the impacts we're having for kids. So, we feel like this isn't just a nice to have. This is a must have for kids in our community. And we want to grow the opportunity for more kids in the area.
So where do you see Kid Museum going in the next 5 years, maybe? That interview question. Where do you see yourself in
5 years? Yeah. Well, so 5 years from now, we really hope that we will be in a much larger space and serving many more kids and families. So right now we're in a 7,000 square foot facility, and we're working toward a 50,000 square foot facility.
Are you already scouting?
Oh, yeah, we are actively scouting. And we actually, this year, we're really fortunate that our local government, we had an authorization in the capital budget for funds to support the acquisition and build out of a permanent home. So now next step, now we just have to secure that location. But we are making progress toward that. So I think substantively, that would mean, we get to a place where we're serving 300,000 people a year. Right now, we're serving about 55,000 people a year through our programs. So we really see the ability to reach many, many more kids, have a lot more of our maker programs where kids are experimenting with new technologies, but also just using their hands with woodworking and textiles and learning to build and how to make things. But in addition to the maker work, complementing that with more ongoing, really robust cultural programs, encouraging kids to explore different cultures, appreciate differences in a deep way, and not a superficial or in the flags kind of way, but to really understand what culture is made of and how that gets sort of accumulated over time, and take that in, and also create more opportunities for kids to engage in community service projects. So right now we have community service camps where kids go in the area and they're participating in volunteer efforts at a wider circle and man a food bank and all over the community. It's something that we'd love to grow and have more opportunity for youth to engage in ways to make this immediate community a better place as well.
Fantastic. I love it. Just before I let you go, I have just two more questions. Can you talk a bit about KidFest? There's one coming up soon.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit
more
about that?
KidFest is coming up September 23rd. It's in downtown Silver Spring, 12 to 5. We take over the whole Civic Building and Veterans Plaza and shut down a street or two around it. And it's a really fun event. It really is an event like nothing else in the area. It is...
What should we expect?
It's a bit of hands-on science, but glimpse into the future. So everything, especially this year, we're really making an effort to connect the dots for kids all of this work is about empowering kids to invent the future. And so we have exhibitors and businesses coming out and showing the future of biotechnology, the future of transportation, the future of building and housing, and the future of girls, and really sort of thinking across boundaries and across categories, and lots of hands-on experiences for kids, mostly geared toward elementary and middle school age kids. There will be middle schoolers presenting their work, and high school robotics teams presenting their work. So kids presenting themselves, but also adults sort of presenting what we currently view as the future, and inviting kids to push the adults to think beyond that.
From what you're talking about, I'm seeing value for adults attending also.
Oh yeah,
it's to come over there and say
it's all ages.
What's going on?
And we actually, within the event, we have a series called Kid Talks. That's a series of speakers,
kind of like a Kid TED Talk.
Exactly, you got it. This year we have an all-female lineup of Kid Talks. Yeah, and so we have, for example, the head of Curiosity Studios, which is Curiosity Stream in downtown Silver Spring, a new media company that's sprouted up in the past few years. She'll be speaking about leading that studio. We have the curator of the Renwick Burning Man exhibit, talking about the thinking behind the Burning Man exhibit. We have a leading biotech, biohealth scientist who's going to talk about her work. And so lots of interesting talks, but hands-on, just fun three-ring circus that is all about seeing into the future.
It feels like my kind of place. Just go there and just geek out.
Exactly. Have fun. You can see 3D printers and robots and all those kinds of new technologies, but also we have an exhibitor from the Coiner Farm, which is last remaining farm in downtown Silver Spring, and they have an educational program about farming and the future of food. So not all tech.
Oh, that's awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So, final question: how can we support Kid Museum?
Well, thank you for that question, because we really are trying to build a community resource, and we need the help of our community to create this. This is intentionally, many of our programs are free to the community, like KidFest that I just described, and we were very focused on reaching all kids in the community. So about 60% of our budget comes from donations, from grants and donations. So we rely on individuals who, and gifts large and small, but every bit really is important for us. And I think that when people walk into our space, they get it. They see the power of it for their kids. They think, I'm going to stop by for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and 4 hours later, their kids don't want to leave. And finding a place like that in today's world is unique.
Yeah.
So it's something we're passionate about bringing to our community, continuing to expand on it, continuing to partner with schools and how to bring this kind of innovation into schools. But we can't do it without the help of our community. So I think we always are welcoming individuals, corporations, other grant makers to help support our work. On our website, we have a very clear place about where to donate. This fall at KidFest, we'll be rolling out a whole new series of ways for people to get involved, adopt a school to come for field trips, adopt a school to participate in our Maker Challenge. So lots of ways to show your love for what we're trying to create.
What's your website?
Our website is kid-museum.org. So www.kid-museum.org.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/Friends at Work. That's patreon.com/Friends at Work. You can also reach me by email at myfriendtoye@gmail.com. My Facebook page is Friends at Work Podcast, and my Twitter handle is at Friends at Work US. Join me next time for another episode of Friends at Work Podcast with Ade Toye. Bye for now.